A new hope: COVID vaccines could one day end the pandemic. Scientists behind a new study say both the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines are slashing infection rates after just one dose.
The benefits that the vaccinations provide give us an opportunity to move to a situation where the virus is in the background.
Also this lunchtime.
How does it feel?
Like I'm not a criminal anymore. After their jobs and lives were ruined, the post office workers who finally cleared their names. Downing Street accuses Dominic Cummings of leaking the Prime Minister's text messages and...
For the first time ever, everyone is invited to our iconic Elton John AIDS Foundation Oscar party. Yes.
Sir Elton John's Oscar party, and why this year we're all invited.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good afternoon. It's always been the hope that receiving a COVID vaccine would not just cut the chance of us falling ill, but would prevent us actually catching the virus in the first place. Well, now a study of more than 300,000 people has shown just that. A 65% drop after the first dose, potentially rising to 90% after the second. But in the face of the positive vaccine news, new restrictions on travel from India have come into force, aimed at stopping a new variant arriving here, which means 10 days of hotel quarantine for anyone flying in from the country. With all the details on all of that, here's our political reporter, Shihab Khan.
If you want to come through, and we'll get you to see Kelly and she'll get you registered.
Right.
Thank you.
It's not been often over the last year there's been positive COVID news, but with the vaccine rollout in full flow, that is slowly changing, and there is a feeling of real positivity. Now a new study has found the chances of getting the virus falls sharply after just one dose of either the AstraZeneca or the Pfizer vaccine. Today at this mobile vaccination unit in Luton, most were happy to hear about the latest findings.
Anything that's positive is always a good thing. So much research has gone into this, so much money has gone into the development of it. I trust it. I don't believe in the conspiracies.
Very positive about, the vaccine and the impact it will have.
370,000 people took part in the research conducted by the ONS and the University of Oxford. They found that those who had been vaccinated with a single dose of either AstraZeneca or Pfizer were 65% less likely to get a new COVID infection, and those who had a second vaccine dose of Pfizer were 90% less likely to be infected.
Our data show that vaccination just gives us a huge opportunity to move towards a situation where we can control how we live with the virus, and it becomes part of the background.
The positive news is likely to lead to calls for the government to lift restrictions faster, but ministers say a cautious approach is needed.
What we can't do is tear up all that incredible hard work that people have done, all the parts of their life they've put on hold for the last year, all the lives that have been lost, just on a good set of figures. We need to make sure that those figures are consistent, that we are catching any spikes that come as a result of the various stages of the unlocking.
There are still concerns about cases and new variants being imported from abroad. In India, the situation has been rapidly worsening, and with hundreds of thousands of cases a day, it has now joined the UK's travel red list. But the Labour leader said the government had been too slow in taking action.
I certainly think the government should have acted sooner. I'm glad they have acted. That's the right thing to do, to put it on the red list. This is a battle between the vaccine and variants. It's why we need to be very careful and comprehensive with our border policies.
The news today is positive, but the message from government is to continue to stay cautious as we slowly move out of the pandemic. Shihab Khan, ITV News, Westminster.
Well, our science editor, Tom Clark, is here. Tom, let's start on that vaccine news. Obviously positive, good news. Was it expected?
There was some anticipation, because with other vaccines, we know they can protect you against being infectious with an infectious disease. But we don't know. COVID's new. We didn't know. And these are the sorts of signals that you can't pick up in a clinical trial. The hope, of course, was that it would be. And this is exactly what we've seen. And it is literally the best news we could have got, because it means not only vaccines are going to protect you from going to hospital, dying from COVID, they're also going to stop it from spreading around, and that's what you want to stop an outbreak. Of course, lots of people wondering, well, if that's the case, if the news is that brilliant, let's speed up opening up. And the government being cautious, and I'll tell you why. One reason, remember, not everyone can get the coronavirus vaccine, and it's not 100% effective. So there will be millions of people in the UK, it probably adds up to, who aren't protected. Right now, we cannot afford to risk exposing them to the virus. We have to keep cautious for now.
So as ever, still that word of caution, isn't there?
That's right.
But on infection rates, we've got some new data out this lunchtime which does show that cases are falling in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland.
That's
so more
right.
Good news.
And, you know, it's a Friday. We get this ONS study which gives us an update on the infections. And again, more good news. The outbreak's still heading in that downward trajectory. What we understand today from senior government advisors on this subject is they anticipate those numbers to continue to fall to very low levels through May. But then, because we'll be opening up more, and remember, young people haven't been vaccinated, we are expecting a rise in cases in younger people. Shouldn't be too dangerous, because remember, most young people are not particularly vulnerable to the disease. But, you know, things could look up, and, you know, summer might be OK. It's autumn and winter we have to worry about.
All right, Tom, thank you. Well, the Welsh Government has announced a speeding up of their path out of lockdown. First Minister Mark Drakeford announced that indoor activities for children and adults and the reopening of community centres are being brought forward from May the 17th to May the 3rd. He also said indoor hospitality and all tourism accommodation can reopen from May the 17th.
By the 3rd of May, Wales will have completed or move to alert level 3. The fact that we've been able to do this more quickly than had originally been expected reflects the progress we have made.
Meanwhile, in Northern Ireland, barbers and hairdressers have reopened and driving lessons are allowed to take place. Once again, outdoor visitor attractions can also reopen for the first time since lockdown was imposed after Christmas. Outdoor hospitality and non-essential retail will open next week. Dozens of former post office workers who have had their lives irreparably ruined after being convicted of theft, fraud and false accounting because of failures of the post office's own systems have been cleared by the Court of Appeal. Some lost jobs, others homes and some marriages. Well, the celebrations following today's rulings, which puts an end to years of trauma for the former sub-postmasters.
I don't know how I'm going to feel because, you know, from last 10 years we've been treated like convicted criminals, so it's going to be a different life now. We have to experience that. It does mean a lot for, not just for us, for whole family.
An absolute nightmare. You're just trying to prove that you did nothing wrong.
Somebody needs to be held accountable for this. It can't go hush-hush now. Somebody needs to do something about this. This is wrong.
Well, journalist Nick Wallace has covered this story right from the very beginning, raising the profile of the victims. He joins me now from outside the Court of Appeal. Nick, as I say, you've been involved with this right from the very start. How significant is today's ruling?
Well, the quashing of convictions at the Court of Appeal is a very rare event. The fact that 39 of them have been quashed on one day is just staggering. And you saw the people there, ordinary people whose lives have been completely trammelled by the Post Office. We heard in the Court of Appeal hearing in March that the Post Office had ordered the shredding of documents in relation to this IT system that was rolled out into the Post Office network and which the Post Office chose to believe over its own staff when it came to accounting discrepancies. They were prosecuting people at the rate of one a week over 14 years between 2000 and 2014. And so this is just a small fraction of the number of people who may pass through the Court of Appeal over the forthcoming months and years.
And Nick, you know, this is the result that people wanted. They wanted to hear this news, but, you know, for those people affected, this has been such a long ordeal, hasn't it? I mean, tell us about the impact that it's had on them.
Well, I've been interviewing people sometimes in their darkest moments, not knowing exactly what's been happening to them, whether they're ever going to see justice, and the things that they've been through, the loss of reputation, because these were pillars of the community. They were upstanding people and they were very visible as well. And so their fall from grace was something that affected them very, very deeply. Some people have taken their own lives. Some people suffered hugely, both mentally and physically, as a result of the stress of what happened to them. So today is a day for them to celebrate and have some happiness, but also there has to be proper redress for them and accountability. I've followed this story for so long, and the government has still said that despite everything, it doesn't believe anyone should actually be held to account for what happened.
All right, Nick Wallace, thank you so much for talking to us this lunchtime. Thank you. Still to come, how we're all invited to Elton John's usually exclusive Oscars party this year. And a new snap of Prince Louis to mark his 3rd birthday. But first, many potential parents deciding to start or grow their family through adoption might think twice about welcoming more than one child at a time. But now a charity is encouraging people to do just that, rather than breaking up brothers and sisters. There are currently more than 2,000 children waiting to be adopted in England. Almost half, 44%, are part of a sibling group. And according to Adoption UK, 88% of parents who adopted brothers and sisters say the positives outweigh any challenges. Well, I'm very pleased to say I'm joined now by Phil and Chris, who are parents of 3 adopted boys, 2 of whom were adopted together as brothers, and also child psychologist Dr. Elizabeth Kilby. Thank you all for joining me this lunchtime. Chris and Phil, we're going to start with you. You'd already adopted your first child, and I know he has complex needs, so you knew of challenges already, but then you decided to adopt again, and the next time you went for 2 siblings. So you had lots to think about, but why did you reach that decision in the end?
The second time round was slightly complicated. Initially, it was just 1 child, but then when we looked at his report, we saw that there was actually 2 children in foster care. Again, it was another child with complex needs, but we saw immediately the positives of, can we leave that sibling behind? And we just decided, no, we can't leave that sibling behind. We want to adopt both. It's part of their family history. They had quite a unique bond, and we were just... There's just no way we just couldn't do it.
And I think we're going to show some pictures. You take part in it's this adoption campaign that's happening at the moment. I think we can see your whole family there. Listen, just talk us through it, because a lot of families, where they're considering adopting, for siblings as well, all sorts of factors, including things like money, and there are other challenges, which is understandable, isn't it? So what would you say to them?
I would say is you've got to really think how you can manage all these things. For example, it's managing that time between each sibling, so you can factor in time for each individual child and meeting those kind of needs. But then it is the practical factors. For example, we decided we need to buy a bigger car because there was no choice about it. We had quite a small car. How many spare bedrooms we had in the house. And then it was also then it's saying to the family members, grandparents said, well, we were going for 1, but we've actually got 2 now. And it was kind of it was a surprise, wasn't it, for them?
Yeah, I'm worried about the financial side of things, or how we're going to cope with that. The support is out there. It's definitely worth doing. Even if you think you can't, just make the inquiry.
Yeah, because the social workers are there in the background. When you go through the adoption process, you assign a social worker. They will go through everything with you, provide the necessary support that you need, come to that conclusion. And there's no harm in asking, really. But there are so many sibling groups out there that are looking for forever families. Yeah.
Chris and Phil, thank you for the moment. I want to bring in Dr. Elizabeth at this point, because there is this unique bond between siblings, isn't it? How important is it for their development and their happiness to stay together if possible?
Wherever possible, we know it's really important for siblings to be together, because they have those relationships, they have those attachments, and the reassurance, the comfort, the emotional connection that the children bring to each other actually then acts as a really strong platform for them to build a bond with their adoptive parents. So actually adopting brothers and sisters can make the adoption process smoother.
Yeah, and also, is there an impact on children if they are separated at an early age like that? Is it best to keep them together if possible?
We really believe, from a child development point of view, wherever possible, we want to maintain links, emotional bonds, ties. That's what really matters, those secure connections. So yes, we do think that if children can't stay together, then that's not always in their best interest. And wherever possible, we want to maintain the link to people's culture and heritage.
OK, thank you, Dr. Elizabeth. Final word to Chris and Phil. If you could just sum it up in about 4 or 5 words, how has life changed for the better by doing this?
Happy chaos.
Yeah, happy chaos, happy noise.
Well, that is perfect. That is brilliant. Listen, thank you all for talking to me about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No worries.
Now, Downing Street is pointing the finger at Dominic Cummings after a series of private messages to and from the Prime Minister were leaked to the media. Just yesterday, an internal inquiry was launched into how texts between the Prime Minister and billionaire Sir James Dyson were passed to journalists. Now, Downing Street sources are blaming Mr Cummings, who quit as Boris Johnson's senior advisor last year. Our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan, is at Downing Street for us this lunchtime. So, Carl, how surprising is this?
Well, there's certainly been a degree of speculation that Dominic Cummings is the sort of person who would have had perhaps access to the Prime Minister's communications and, given that he was sacked from Number 10, the motivation to go on and leak them. But Mr Cummings said that he has nothing to do with this, or at least friends of his have said that. And what is slightly more surprising, I think, is that someone in Downing Street thought it would be a good idea to brief the fact that Dominic Cummings was the chief suspect in their leak inquiry, thereby ensuring that we're all still talking about it, and it was on several front pages today. Just to remind viewers, this is about a series of texts between the Prime Minister and the industrialist Sir James Dyson in March last year, when Sir James was offering to come and build ventilators here, and the Prime Minister was reassuring them that his staff wouldn't have to pay extra tax if they did so. Earlier this week, the Prime Minister said that he would publish communication with people that he'd been personally negotiating contracts with, and a short time ago he did say that the text with Sir James would be published later today. But in truth, it's not so much the substance of those texts, it's the fact that senior industrialists were able to directly lobby the Prime Minister on his personal phone that has caused a bit of a storm and a bit of a fuss about this series of text messages.
All right, Carl, thank you. Now, the huge sums that the government has borrowed during the pandemic have pushed the amount the country owes to its highest point since the end of the Second World War. The Office for National Statistics said that public sector borrowing reached over £303 billion in the financial year to the end of March. Well, Neil Connery is here. Neil, eye-watering numbers, but actually not as bad as predicted.
No, I mean, the scale of the impact of COVID is certainly clear from that headline figure of £303.1 billion, as you say. Measures such as furlough payments have certainly hit the government finances hard. These are huge numbers, but it's not the £400 billion anticipated a few months back, although today's numbers will increase when some COVID support loans fail to be repaid. I think the key question facing the wider economy is what a post-COVID recovery actually looks like. Now, we've had a glimmer of hope today in the latest Purchasing Managers Index figures. They rose to 60 in April. Any figure above 50 indicates expansion. So what it shows is that the UK private sector is now growing at its fastest pace since 2013. There is no escaping the huge challenges facing the economy, but there are clearly signs of optimism at last.
All right. Neil, thank you. Retail sales rose faster than expected in March. Despite being before the reopening of non-essential shops in England, sales increased by more than 7% compared with last year. Clothing saw the biggest rise. And the government's fan-led review of football will consider whether supporters should be given a share of the ownership of clubs. It follows the failed attempt to establish a breakaway European Super League involving 6 Premier League teams. It will also look at whether an independent regulator is needed. Now, for almost 3 decades, Sir Elton John has been inviting his famous friends to his glamorous Oscar night party. The guest list normally reads like a who's who of Hollywood, but this year everyone is invited, albeit virtually. Sangeeta Kandola on perhaps the most exclusive Zoom party yet.
It is one of the hottest tickets in town on Oscar night, Elton John's annual party. But this year, you can get on the guest list. Elton and husband David are especially appealing to those still stuck in their pandemic pyjamas.
Bored with lockdown?
For the first time ever, everyone is invited to our iconic Elton John AIDS Foundation Oscar party.
And you can join the virtual star-studded soiree for a small sum. All money raised goes to the singer's AIDS Foundation.
So, tickets cost just $19.99 are available now.
Elton's event will stream across 4 different time zones with 400,000 tickets available and some special performances too.
Dua Lipa.
So excited to be part of this iconic event with such an amazing history of artists.
Meanwhile, preparations are well underway for the main event, the Oscars. It's moved in Maine from its home at the Dolby Theatre in Hollywood to Union Station, a real railway station in downtown LA. Staying the same, the famous gold statues, of course, but it will be stripped back.
Because of COVID, it's certainly a much more intimate affair, so we will only be there with the nominees, their guests, and the presenters.
And organisers say they want the ceremony to feel like a movie and have been referring to presenters as its cast. So it should be an interesting watch.
And I'll be joining her.
So too will Elton's pre-Oscar party, where he's hoping to entertain and raise millions for charity.
And we'll see you on Sunday.
Sangeeta Kandola, ITV News.
Well, I might have to go. Finally, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have marked Prince Louis's 3rd birthday by releasing a photograph of their son pictured on his first day of nursery school. The photo was taken at Kensington Palace by the Duchess of the young royal riding his bike before setting off for Wilcox Nursery School, where his sister, Princess Charlotte, also attended the school. A reminder of our main story this lunchtime. There is new hope that COVID vaccines could one day end the pandemic. Scientists behind a new study say both the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccine are slashing infection rates after just 1 dose. And that's it. I'm back with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. The news where you are follows the weather. But from everyone on the Lunchtime team, bye-bye.